You're listening to the Evolving Truths podcast, featuring mother-daughter hosts Shannon Day and Alexus Ray, where honest and vulnerable conversations about personal growth create a connection between all of us. You're invited to experience the transformation that occurs when we allow the truth of who we are to evolve.
Hello, you beautiful heart and soul. Welcome back to the Evolving Truths podcast. My name is Alexus Ray, and with me, as always, is my beautiful mama, Shannon Day. Hi, Mom.
Hi, Alexus.
How are you doing today?
I am doing well. Very excited to start my Sunday morning hanging out with you, having a conversation.
Girl, me too, because let me tell you, we got some tea to cover today. I am feeling so excited about this topic, not because it has been fun to live through, but because I think that it's something we all can take something away from.
I like that. Those are always good. Speaking of something we can all relate to, I needed to get a new cell phone, and that adventure always takes longer than one ever thinks it will. Apparently, I keep a ton of stuff on my phone. I don't really know that I utilize that tool to its fullest potential. Maybe I should figure that out one day, but it took forever to get stuff to connect, to transfer over. And it was saying there wasn't enough storage on it, which didn't make any sense because who cares? It's being transferred over. And now you have to re-sign into all these places and remember your passwords. And I love my Wordle, but I do not sign in to play Wordle. And now my stats have started over. So it's a clean slate, but not really a clean slate. So, I think many here can relate to the challenge of getting a new phone. And we're just going to see how long it is before I drop it.
Well, don't even put that in the universe. Why even put that in the universe?
We all know it's a thing. It's just, it happens. But it's also, in addition to those struggles, a whole new world for me because the screen isn't cracked and it's not all scratched up, and I can actually see really well what's on my phone. So that part's kind of fun. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. This is actually my second meeting of the day, well into it and ready to dive in. But all in all, I'm doing well. This week was hectic. It's Sunday today. I was telling a friend of mine last night that I actually feel like my weeks actually start on Sunday. Like for the last maybe 2 months now, I've worked pretty consistently, at least 2 Sundays a month. And so just realizing that I am still in this season right now of 6 days a week, kind of in my hustle and my grind, and continuing to take rest and continuing to manage my health amongst all of that. Like, I'm really proud of myself and grateful for that. So all in all, I would say that I'm like an 8 out of 10, or not. Like, I'm up there. I'm doing good.
I like it.
This is a big week for you, and I'm going to get to see you.
It is a big week.
And we're going to get to go on this crazy adventure. And that excites me. And I know that I just have to get from today until Thursday afternoon. And when Thursday afternoon rolls around, I'll be able to fully switch my mind over to your 50-miler adventure. And so in the meantime, I'm just getting through these next 4.5 days.
I like it. I would love to not need to think about my 50-miler until Thursday, but if I'm not consciously thinking about it, I'm probably subconsciously thinking about it. And I can't believe how close it is. This time next week, I will have completed my first 50-mile race. Put that into the universe. Speaking of things to speak into the universe, there it is.
Girl. Absolutely. Absolutely. I'm so proud of you. You are doing it. I'm pretty sure at this point, like, your training's starting to taper down, right? So you've already done all the prep. You've already done all the work. Now it's just getting you there and going through it. And again, so proud of you.
Thank you, Alexus.
Now it's just fun. Now you just get to sit back and enjoy the fruits of your labor.
I'll try and think about it that way.
Perfect.
What are we here to chat about?
I have been the subject of this experience, and it's not always an enjoyable one. And I find it hilarious that I'm ready to come here and talk about it now with excitement.
Vigor and vim.
I like it. Tell me more.
Vigor's like excitement. I feel like that's a statement maybe my dad used to say. It's like energetic, excited.
What's them?
Vim, V-I-M. Energy, enthusiasm, like vim.
Okay. I am vigorous and vim. Okay, that sounds great. So let me stop teasing this topic here. Raise your hand, whether you're by yourself or watching this or listening to this, raise your hand if you have ever experienced someone sharing their opinion with you about something you've done, a way that you've behaved, something you said, and it was not necessarily the nicest feedback. I like to call this being blasted. Totally raise my hand as well.
My hand's up.
Being blasted sucks. But what do we do with the information and determine how we're going to move forward?
To get some context, Lexus, are you referring to getting this kind of feedback? I'm going to call it feedback, I guess. Are you getting this from friends, a partner, coworker, supervisor? Like what's the context we were referring to this in?
Great question. I have actually received it as an employer. I had a contractor last year that didn't end overly amicably by the end. And this person decided to tell me anything and everything that they interpreted I had done wrong. And that sucked. Additionally, there's been times where I ended a relationship, and because of how the conversations had gone at this point in time, we had landed on email. And so I received an email blasting who and what I am as a person, how and what I've done or gone about delivering the information and decisions that I've gone about. So I've received it as a boss, as a person in a relationship or coming out of a relationship, I should say. And I've also received it as an employee when you hear from someone that you are trying not to let down, like a boss, and they share with you WTF, basically. That never feels good. I've received it being on a sports team. I have been coached and played sports, and I have been lit up by coaches before for how and what I've done, how and what I've said, and have had to choose what to do with it. So I think this context really applies anywhere in life.
When you referred to a partner and ending a relationship, that it had gotten to the point where your communications were email, and in an email they proceeded to tell you all these things, that's when I would use a term like blasted. To me, in that case, I wouldn't think that they're really providing it because they want it to benefit you. They're providing it because maybe there's some pain in this relationship, some hurt. They're looking at things for themselves, though not realizing it. And then more in essence, taking it out on the other person, opposed to, let's say, in a friendship, if someone says, hey, and like gives you some feedback, and this is a friendship you're working on and want to keep, or in a professional relationship, same thing. So I think to keep in mind the area that you're receiving the feedback, because to me, that then can affect how you receive it.
Absolutely. We get these blasting conversations, then we get to choose how much of this am I actually going to give my energy to? How much of this am I actually going to retain and choose to do something with? And how much of this do I just need to press the delete button because it's really not mine?
Right.
That's the hope of having this conversation with you today, is being able to say there are different contexts for this and we know it happens, but life is 10% what happens to you and 90% how you react to it.
I agree with that. I don't know that those percentages are exact, but they do completely illustrate that our reactions to things have a much bigger impact than what the things actually are.
That's really the point. Things are happening to us constantly, but our perception, our reaction is the one thing that we actually do have control over. And
Right.
that's going to determine how and what we do moving forward.
So constructive criticism is when we're wanting to share something with someone because we have good intentions. We want to see them improve and also be there to perhaps provide some support and ways to do that. I think that is very different, like I just mentioned about like the relationship with a partner, than someone's just a bunch of you this, you that, you this, you that, and not taking any responsibility for any of their behaviors. Two different things.
Absolutely. And today we're talking about the blasting, not necessarily the constructive criticism, but that definition is so important because you do have to be able to put this blasting in context.
Okay. It took us a hot minute to get here, but I needed to know the framework of where we were going. And then we can make notes in the future, maybe, and have a different conversation about constructive criticism.
I like that. Okay.
All
So
right.
now that we've landed on how do you respond to a blasting from someone? So at this point in time, we're just going to say that you have experienced being blasted. You've experienced someone sharing their opinion with you in a way that didn't make you feel good. And it didn't feel like they were trying to help move you forward with constructive feedback.
For me, it's been a hot minute since that's happened. I feel like part of it is one, with the exception of things we do on Evolving Truths, and for the most part, that feedback has been positive. I'm not like you, really out there in the social media world. And I also feel like maybe because of the season of life I'm in, I have very much reached a point where perhaps I have been blasted, and honestly, I don't give a fuck, Lex. So I don't recognize it necessarily as a blasting because I've been able to get myself to a space of not mine and give it away pretty quickly, or maybe not even have myself in situations where it comes up. So those are the glasses I think that I have on right now as we have this conversation. And one, I think good news is if I've been able to get to this point, it's coming for everyone. And two, because you ask insightful questions, maybe as we have this conversation, there'll be some things I can recognize or realize and share with you that can help you get to this space sooner in life. And three, you're going to maybe have more to say about this than me because these are some recent experiences for you.
Well, I also think that you're going to be able to give us this different perspective because I can't see the paint from inside the painting. And in these situations, normally I come to you and talk about them because I do need perspective. All right, so let's talk about it. Okay, we now have the definition of blasted. We now have some situational context where you could be experiencing someone just lashing out. And how do you move through it? What are the things that you do for yourself to be able to not let it bring you down and actually take it as an opportunity to evolve and become closer to the type of person you want to be in life?
That sounds great.
Cool. Okay. So diving in. What I imagine is we now have just come up to like a riverbank and there's some little rocks peeking through, and you're basically just going to be stepping, trying to cross this rushing river that you're now experiencing, kind of thing. So, the first little rock that we're going to step out onto as we try and cross this river is recognizing what of this is a true reflection, what of this is an emotional reaction, what of this is real from our perception. And again, I want to continue to say perception is everything. This person is sharing from their perspective. Then there's my perspective. Then there's something somewhere in the middle. But first things first, we have to get clear on being able to take ourselves out of the emotion of it. And here's your first choice point, basically. What am I gonna take this as?
Actually, I'm going to give you a free first choice point. Let's say you start having a conversation with someone and you recognize pretty quickly that what this is turning into is going to be a blasting. You can step out of that conversation. We often think or feel an obligation or responsibility to stay in a space with someone or have a conversation with someone when it's heading down this direction. And we don't. And so before we even get to this part, I think let's remember that. And at the same time, recognize that's much easier said than done, and recognize the amount of personal strength and knowing that it could take to have the ability to stop someone and maybe set some boundaries around a conversation. Not saying it's not necessarily a conversation that doesn't need to be had, but it doesn't need to be had in a blasting manner, right? So being able to do that. Hashtag life goals.
Sure. You're not always going to get to opt out, though.
I think it's an option that is not considered enough. Where does this thought that I can't opt out of this come from? And now, yes, I'm with you. Step one. Once we've received this, now what?
Okay, so we're standing on the riverbank, and as you're standing on the riverbank, you either get to opt in or opt out. Then we get to say which parts of this are
Legit.
actually things I need to look at.
Yeah, like which parts of this are legitimate? Because while not always the case, there are definitely exceptions. I do think at times, even in a quote unquote blasting, that there might be some validity to some of what's said.
Because they wouldn't have this perception if that wasn't their experience. And it can all be rolled up in the emotion of it. That's where blasting comes from. So being able to check the legitimacy of some of this. And that's an internal check. That's not something that you're like, oh, what you're telling me isn't legitimate. Don't do that in the middle of a blasting because that's just going to make it worse.
Now we're in a full-fledged argument.
Yeah. At least when it's blasting, you're basically just receiving this verbal lashing and you don't have to like actually respond to it.
Yes, this could be another point where choosing how to engage with it, right? I mean, we're again back to how are we going to react to this?
Yeah. And if we can't stop it in the moment, then okay, here's where we're at. So we look at what was said and we say, okay, these are the things that I'm going to agree are legitimate. And I'm going to leave the rest to the emotional reaction, to the hurt feelings, to the whatever baggage that this subject is dealing with, because we don't have to carry all of it. And then we can look at ourselves. We evaluate what we did, how we did it, and why we did it. And then we determine what do we want to do different in the future, because us as individuals want to evolve and want to continue to get better. And even though this doesn't feel good, this is feedback on how we show up in the world.
Right.
So sticking with what we did, how we did it, and why we did it, that's really where the magic happens when it comes to our personal evolution, because transformation is the domain of the present. So if we can determine right now what we want to do different in the future, when that opportunity comes up, we have this little memory. Okay, this is what I said I would do the next time an experience like this happened. But what we really need to focus on is this first part of the reflection, because you can't even get to the visualization of how you want to handle it in the future if you're too caught up in the emotion of what is being said, how it's being said, and why you don't think it's real.
We get defensive. I mean, even when we are receiving what we'll talk about in the future, constructive feedback, it tends to be human nature to get defensive. In a blasting, that can be even more so. And so figuring out that power in the pause, We haven't talked about that in a hot minute, right? But power in the pause, just taking a moment. And I think with the taking the moment, it's also acknowledging this feels like shit right now. And it's made me feel like shit. And sitting in that space for a minute, because if we ignore that feeling, there's a good possibility that we do something in an unhealthy manner to cope with it instead of just acknowledge it. Not all of our feelings are great. So I think acknowledging that, and then after that breath saying, now what am I going to do with it?
I love that. I love that. The personal defenselessness of being able to just put our armor down. I totally made that word up. Go ahead.
I was getting ready to say it again. Putting our armor down for ourselves,
Yeah.
not to the other person, like being okay to just sit in those shitty feelings for a minute.
Absolutely. Staying defenseless, the sitting in it, the power in the pause, the moment for ourselves to just land in the way that we're feeling right now. Because no, it doesn't feel good. And I've been blasted 4 times in 12 months. I recognize that I'm putting myself into the world in different ways, and I'm okay with that. And ideally, any of us could accomplish our personal missions without needing to get blasted. That's a dream come true. I'm with you
Would
there.
be.
So I'm just going to recap what we have so far. First and foremost, you get to choose to opt in or opt out when it's happening, right? If you're in the middle of the blasting and you can just cut it off right where it's happening, then cut it off. And if that's not an option for you, then life has naturally opted you in, which is typically how challenges go. Then sitting in the power of the pause and just acknowledging the fact that it feels shitty. It feels terrible. And what this person just communicated to you isn't a total reflection of yourself. As we're sitting with these feelings,
I think you need that pause to really give you a good reflection. I think if you attempt to do that reflection before the pause, you may walk away carrying more than you need to, or not with kind of your lens as clear as it could be.
I agree with that. We're going to have an emotional reaction as
Right.
well. And so being
Mhm.
able to take that space, be able to take that step back, be able to just take a breath. And this could be 5 minutes. That time could be what you share with some of your friends, like set the timer and feel the feelings. Do you want to explain that for us for a second, actually?
Yeah, it's a good little tool. When we have bad feelings or we're having, let's say, a hard day, or we're operating from a place of fear, like any of those just kind of negative things that sit with us, and this thought that, well, that's just how it's going to be. So instead, again, acknowledge the feelings. No good comes from not acknowledging feelings, good or bad. So acknowledge this is the place I'm in right now. And then ask yourself, well, how long do you want to feel this way? And set a timer for it. I want to feel this way for 7 minutes and 12 seconds. I always like odd numbers. So you set a timer, and then you're sitting there, either just sitting in it or doing whatever it is that you're doing, waiting for this timer to go off, because when the timer goes off, you're going to shift. You use that as your cue to go, now I'm going to focus on this. And eventually you realize, and maybe it's a 5-minute timer, a 3-minute timer, and you realize, I don't even need to wait for this timer to go off. This is silly. I've felt it. I'm acknowledging it. Let's move on because it's not serving me. So it's a good little tip I've used and share. And thank you to whoever I got it from.
I love it. Okay, so in power in the pause, we're going to use this timer tactic. The third thing is being able to look at what am I actually going to take with me and what am I going to leave here. Step 4, personal reflection. Okay, this is the starting to look at the past as well as planning for the future. We evaluate what we did, how we did it, and why we did it. And then we determine, what do we want to do different in the future? Why did you do what you did that created this outcome in my life so far? As long as I have carried out that action from a place that had good intention, and as long as I'm grounded in why I took that behavior, then that continues to help us not internalize this blasting. Now, there can be times, and there have been times in my life where I've received a blasting. It can be like, oh yeah, I really didn't do that action from a good place. And sometimes, that's deserved. We're all human. I'm
Mhm.
okay with saying that, but I've never tried to be malicious. And as long as you know that and you can continue to ground in it, then we can say, I was trying to come from a good place and it didn't land the way that it meant to. So if we determined that it came from a good place, now we got to figure out the how, because next time we know we're going to want to do it differently. So
Or
what,
are we?
or are we? Maybe there isn't anything that you would change about your how. If what I'm trying to accomplish isn't being translated, then this is me taking the ultimate responsibility for the part that I played in it and being able to say, how did I do it? And why didn't this go the way I thought it was going to go? Because typically, a blasting catches you off guard sometimes. Like, whoa, this is way off, way further away than where I thought or meant for us to be. Stating that out loud to yourself, whether it's in a journal, whether it's to the person that you're having this conflict with, maybe you still have to stay in relationship with them. Maybe you don't. Here is what I'm going to do differently the next time this comes up. Or here's how I want to do this different in the future. And I would avoid saying better, anything to tell you the way that you did it wrong, because there is no right or wrong. Literally, it's trial and error. So, what are you going to do different? And you don't have to feel bad about the fact that it didn't go the way that you would have wanted it to go the first time. And then I think basically as you cross over to the other side of the river, because now we've taken 3, 4, 5 steps to get here, you're coming across this bank and you're able to look yourself in the mirror and be proud of identifying what you want to do different going forward. And you can leave the rest and the past behind you. I guess that's really all I have to say about blasting.
And this analogy of using rocks to cross a river, as we get clearer, perhaps the rocks we're getting to step on are a little bit bigger, but also knowing that when attempting to cross a river and stepping on those rocks, we're still going to get a little bit wet, right? Our feet are still going to get a little bit wet. This is a fun analogy, Lex, with the river, because it's moving, right? It's flowing, it's constantly changing. And the power that comes from recognizing that things that in the moment feel so huge are moving, like it's flowing through, it's gonna move on. And recognizing that can be a piece that helps us in this space as well. I am going to say too, when you're talking about blasting, I really want to set aside social media as its own space. None of us are all things to all people. We are not going to be. And social media is a place where people can, behind a screen, say things. And even if we maybe personally know the person who said it, or are 2 or 3 or 4 points removed from that person, so it feels a little more personal. Again, recognizing on social media, people are going to say things that they would never say to someone's face. And so I think the space that individuals who are out there in that way have to figure out how to give themselves some good boundaries around that and protect themselves around that is so key, because a lot of these blastings that you're maybe going to get on social media are from people you don't even know. Yes, you're out there and putting yourself out there with good content, and because you want to have a positive impact on the world. And so having people say things that are a blasting or that are negative or putting you down is hurtful. Like, I'm not going to say that it's not. I mean, I've not experienced that because I don't put myself out there in that way. But man, don't get so wrapped up in that, and the time and energy that can get spent in that. Like, why.
Yeah.
So that's the caveat that I will throw into this conversation, that these positive ways, I think I'd say, that we've discussed how to respond when receiving a blasting, and some things that you can learn from it, the context of it. And these tools and these things that we're sharing really apply for those relationships in your life. And when it comes to social media, when there are those times that it makes sense to respond, yes. Those times that it makes sense to kind of step back, yes. And especially if you have done something that's caused harm, clearly be open to learning that. But if it's just a difference of opinion, or someone not liking the fact that you were wearing a pink shirt, or I feel like you mentioned me, even though you didn't say their name or anything about them, that's theirs, man. That's theirs.
And I think that brings it back to being able to identify which parts are you going to take with you and which parts are you not, right? I love that you just say that that's theirs, because truly it's like most of the time, I would say most of the time, a blasting will come from someone feeling wronged.
Mhm.
And that is because we are our own centers of our universe, right?
Mhm.
It takes a lot to be able to step out of that and say inside of ourselves that we recognize the world doesn't revolve around us. And so whatever decisions some person is making probably doesn't have you at the center of it.
Right. Right.
Now that's when the feeling comes up that you want to blast someone, right? Because
Mhm.
don't get me wrong, there have been plenty of times where I've wanted to give someone my personal opinion, and being able to again choose, what is this purpose? What is this serving? What about this is actually about them? And what is this reaction that I'm currently feeling actually telling me about myself? But being able, like, one, thank you for that, Mom. Truly, thank you for that, because it's true. We forget that social media is not real. It's literally just an illusion. And so whatever keyboard attackers are writing to you, blow that shit off. Now,
Mhm.
if there is something that you do feel like you need to address, then address it from the place of recognizing why you did it. And as long as you're grounded in a good purpose, then the rest of it doesn't matter, and what you want to do different going forward. And in my case, for instance, causing a little spicy controversy this week, I'm over here like, yeah, I'm going to do more of that, because I actually feel like that's the stirring of the pot that needs to happen to wake some people up.
Yeah.
But bringing us to our final step and wrapping this up, I'd love to share just another example to kind of put a bow on this. Okay. There were two monks that walked up to a river. And the types of monks that these are gentlemen who actually are absolutely celibate to the point where they're not allowed to touch women. There's an elderly woman sitting at the bank of the river, and when they walk up, they're like, what are you doing here? Kind of random, just chilling. And she shares, I can't cross the river right now. It's too high. I need to wait to get to the other side. I have to wait for the water to go down. So one of the monks decides to actually carry her across the water. All three of them get to the other side. The monks carry on with their journey, and it takes about 8 miles for the other monk to turn to the guy that carried her across the water and go, I can't believe you just did that. And the monk that carried her across the water says, I put her down 8 miles ago. So once you cross this river, leave it at the edge of the bank.
That was fun. I loved that. I think there's a Trevor Hall song, Put Down What You Are Carrying.
Yeah, girl. Love that song.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a good one. Also, this whole conversation, and especially about thinking about social media and sometimes how people react, or even, yeah, just in life, this thought that the world centers around us, and we know that, but that Carly Simon song, You're So Vain, you probably think this song is about you, don't you? I just
Yeah,
can't
girl.
help but keep thinking about that song as we have this conversation. Well, Alexus, this has been a good conversation to have, because I think it is something that we've all experienced at one time or another, in one form or another. And being able to just name it and get it out there is a good thing.
And
Hopefully it stimulates more conversations for the fam bam.
take it as a chance to do something. If something in your life is making you feel shitty, then what can you take away from it so that if and when this comes up again, you don't have to feel bad about it. This is truly a conversation about taking our power back in a situation when we maybe don't feel like we have any.
Yeah.
And I am passionate about this, maybe because I've been through it a couple of times over the last year. And I hope that this conversation helps someone be able to create an opportunity out of something that doesn't feel good, because that is how we evolve. That is how we grow. That is how we keep going.
And find ways to stand in our truth.
Amen. Amen. Okay. What a way to freaking kick off this new season. And I am so grateful, Mom, to have spent this time with you. I'm so grateful to have had this conversation with you. And to you, beautiful heart and soul listening, thank you for listening to this episode. And we can't wait to be back next week. In the meantime, if Mom and I are totally your cup of tea, please leave a 5-star rating. Please leave a review of the show on whatever platform you are listening. If you know someone that would take something away from this conversation or any of our previous conversations, please share an episode with them. You're not going to want to miss any upcoming episodes. So make sure you follow us on whatever platform you are listening. Anything else, Mom?
We'll be back next week.
In the meantime, please remember that life is beautiful and you create the magic. Have a good one.
Connect with Shannon and Alexus in the Evolving Truths community by visiting evolvingtruthspodcast.com. Links are in the show notes. The Evolving Truths podcast is produced by Shannon Day and Alexus Ray, recorded from the Corner Studio in conjunction with Alexus Ray Enterprises, LLC.